What's up, guys? Run the gauntlet here. We love fantasy football. You love fantasy football, and we are going into week 8 of fantasy football. Starts and sits for the week along with streamers. Enjoy the show.
Guys, week 7 is in the books of the NFL season, and there is a lot to discuss. Between all the bye weeks that happened, the trade deadline approaching, there is lots to bring up, but most importantly, is getting you guys ready to win your week 8 matchup. So today we're going to talk about some streams, some players to watch going forward, and I don't know about you, man, but this is about the point where the men separate themselves from the boys in fantasy football. The moves we make in the midseason going into the end of the season can win you a championship.
Well, yeah, I was gonna follow you up with that, but you just said it. I was gonna say this is about the time of the year that the playoff teams become playoff teams, and the people who aren't. This is when it separates. You're about halfway through the season, and this is really when the men separate from the boys in every league. So it's important that each and every week you're making the right moves because you could be good at fantasy football and still miss the playoffs. Really, just based off of playing the right matchups every week.
Yeah, matchups and the right pickups, winning the waiver wire at this part of the season is more important than ever before. Guys are a lot more willing to bite on trades. Guys are willing to pull the trigger. This is when you want to put yourself in the position to win a championship. So I'm going to get right into it, and I'm going to talk about some players to watch, that I feel should be highlighted going forward from Week 8 and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to start off with Elijah McGuire, the New York Jets' second-year running back.
That's an interesting one. I would have never thought of him. So.
Bilal Powell just went on the injured reserve today, potentially having a career-ending neck injury.
Oh, is that what happened?
Yeah, he's worse than Quincy Enunwa, and he's 30 years old. He's a running back.
Bilal Powell, there's no reason for him to come back.
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing left for him to prove. On this Jets team, he's not winning a championship. He's in a contract year. This is probably the end of his career, and as a Jets fan, that hurts. But listen, we got to move forward. We can't look in the rearview mirror. And
you guys could let someone be a bell cow at some point without Bilal Powell there.
I don't think the Jets are going to do that with Isaiah Crowell and Elijah McGuire. But coming into the preseason, before Elijah McGuire got hurt with a relatively minor injury, Elijah McGuire realistically would have been healthy by week 5. Coming into the preseason, based off the estimates of his injury, which I don't exactly remember what it was, but it was something in his lower body. And they just put him on the injured, like the short-term IR, where you can come back after week 8. Because why wouldn't they? They had a plethora of depth at receiver, and they want to try out a few guys at a few places.
Yeah.
But Elijah McGuire coming into the offseason was compared by Stump Mitchell, the Jets running back coach, who worked with David Johnson and LaDainian Tomlinson. He said Elijah McGuire has the potential to match both of those dudes. I'm not saying I believe that hype.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is coming from somebody in the organization talking about his third-string running back at the time, I think that speaks volumes to the potential workload that McGuire could potentially take on without Bilal Powell there, without really... Trenton Cannon, he had a good game against the Minnesota Vikings, but he really had one wheel route that Sam Darnold fouled him on. Trenton Cannon is a green return man. That's all he is. That's all he can do in the NFL right now. And Elijah McGuire showed flashes last year. He was actually a pretty competent rookie. Just, he was buried on the depth chart. Typical Jets running back stuff.
Yeah. I mean, listen, for whatever it's worth, the Jets running backs aren't something I pay attention to, so I had actually just missed the Bilal Powell injury this past week, to be 100% honest with you, at least in terms of being, season-ending and potentially career-ending, I did not know. I think Martavis Bryant, after the Amari Cooper trade, is definitely a guy you should have your eye on, especially because he's available almost everywhere, in every circumstance, and rightfully so. Man, but let's not forget the hype that's been around Martavis Bryant his entire career. There's a reason for it. He's really, really talented. While he has no particularly great matchups on paper over the course of the season, he doesn't have any particularly bad ones. Their defense isn't very good, and game flow is going to be in his favor for most of the season. So it's a good guy to put on your bench and see what happens.
Oh, amazing stash, especially starting opposite of Jordy Nelson.
Yeah, I agree. And for all we know, he could end up being better than Jordy Nelson, at least in terms of fantasy football, and then I guess at that point, maybe it would be real life.
I mean, it's the same thing if you think about it.
Yeah, it's just, Jordy Nelson's a good option right now, so why wouldn't Martavis Bryant be? And then who knows, he has very big play potential.
Listen, the Raiders still have the 4 or 5 pieces you want to own on the Raiders offense right now are Jordy Nelson, Martavis Bryant, Jared Cook, Jalen Richard, my next player to watch, as well as Doug Martin, another player to watch that I have. Both are guys that should be on your roster. Jalen Richard was second on that team in targets when Marshawn Lynch went down, having 7 targets.
And I don't quite trust, by the way, Doug Martin either to be good. So there's a possibility that Jalen Richard takes on some carries here.
Yeah. No, there's a possibility of him getting 15 touches a game. Along with Doug Martin will still get his 14, maybe 16 touches a game.
Jalen Richard isn't built to be a workhorse in the NFL. That is what it is.
No, absolutely not. No one's proposing to him that he would be. The only value I think Doug Martin has is his pure volume and his potential for a touchdown. But that's something to watch going down the stretch of fantasy football with injuries and bye weeks.
Another guy, I could see the look on your face before it's there. I think Devontae Parker is a guy who you should have your eye on right now. Because you have Albert Wilson and Kenny Stills hurt. After the agent called out Adam Gase, and I'm not on one side or the other, I'm just saying what it is, right after that Adam Gase said that they're going to need him to play in the game against Houston Thursday night. And I just think that Devontae Parker, I was high on him to start the year. I'm not the only one. A lot of people don't like him. But I think at this time of the year, when you have situations like this with a little bit of mystery, I think it's worth taking the last spot on your bench for a guy like Devontae Parker, who could actually end up, at least in PPR formats, potentially being a flex play for you.
Why not just get Danny Amendola, who's owns just as little as Devontae Parker and actually has a track record?
I just think Devontae Parker, we've had this discussion actually, I just think Devontae Parker is better at football than Danny Amendola as an overall product. Maybe Danny Amendola does his one niche thing better than Devontae Parker does anything, but I think overall, for what the Dolphins would need out of a receiver, I do think Devontae Parker brings a lot for them right now.
I do like Devontae Parker, because I was thinking about putting him on this list too. I'm not... Because I put Amendola on my list, personally. I had Amendola down here instead of Devontae Parker.
I just think in this offense that has been relatively stagnant overall, realistically,
Yeah.
I think they have some big plays, but I think in terms of marching up the field, they're not doing a great job. I do think Devontae Parker has potential to help them with that problem.
You see, I think you put the third most relevant guy on that team that's going to do that in order. I think it will be Jakeem Grant, Danny Amendola, and then Devontae Parker. But it can be any one of those dudes. It's a crapshoot.
Yeah, it's the Dolphins receivers.
And you know what, man? I like players on competitive teams. So it's worth... Every one of them is worth mentioning.
You said you had Danny Amendola.
Yes.
And then who else?
Traquan Smith, New Orleans Saints.
Okay.
Traquan Smith had 3 receptions on 7 targets last week without Ted Ginn. Ted Ginn's done. Cameron Meredith did not get a single target.
Is that so?
Yeah, man. Traquan Smith played 57 of 66 offensive snaps. With 7 targets, he's clearly the third option in that passing game behind Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara right now.
I think Benjamin Watson actually has a case for that in a weird way.
In the red zone. Only in the red zone.
He's their third leading receiver on the year.
Tegan got hurt also. That had something to do with it.
And Drew Brees likes the tight end, man.
In what, yardage? What is he leading them in yards?
He's actually third in yardage on the team. And he's Ben Watson and Drew Brees.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Watson's a nice stream tight end, but...
I have him as a start this week, actually, but we could get to that later.
Yeah. No, Watson's nice.
I'm not saying don't watch Traquan Smith.
No, I know what you're saying. It's just on the outside...
I just think there's some nuance to it.
I don't know, man. I think you're overthinking it with Watson. Maybe I'm underthinking it because I do like Ben Watson. I said this from the beginning of the year.
More reliable, man.
Yeah, dude. He's consistent.
Correct me. Jason Witten was actually reliable. Ben Watson's just Ben Watson, but he always works at tight end for whoever he plays for.
He's a nice tight end. He's a good starting tight end. It's just the volume isn't there to call him the third option, I don't think.
I have Ronald Jones as a player to watch, and he's been bad. He's been real bad. But this is players to watch, right? This isn't players to start this week. This isn't players to start next week. This isn't players that you should be considering starting. This isn't
even player you should be rostering.
Yeah, that's not even what it's called. It is players to keep an eye on, is at least what I have on my paper. Ronald Jones has 17 carries for 45 yards on the entire season. So far, he's only gotten action in 3 games. But if the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were to fall out of playoff contention, there is a very large incentive to perhaps try to do Ronald Jones towards the end of the season as compared to Peyton Barber or Jacquizz Rodgers, which really, we know what that is at the end of the day. If they were to fall out of playoff contention in a very high-powered division, may I add, perhaps they start Ronald Jones towards the end of the season, and that may be worth your last bench spot.
Well, listen, the Buccaneers right now are 500. They're still in the thick of things.
Didn't say they weren't. I said if they were to fall out of playoff contention, which I just so happen to be projecting,
Yeah. Then
if
like
they were to, then there's a big incentive with the draft capital invested into Ronald Jones to try to play him this year, towards the end of the year.
yeah, that's true.
Listen, running back's not a very fruitful position. I mean, I wouldn't be proud of having Ronald Jones on my roster.
No,
But-
but there are people who've been owning Peyton Barber for a while.
That's what I'm saying. So it is what it is, the running back position.
Yeah, 100%.
And just to follow up with the running back position, I have one more, I think better than Ronald Jones. This was in no particular order. I think, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Raheem Mostert from the 49ers. This is a very interesting one. I'm not sure if anyone's heard, but I guess if you have a player on the Niners, you have, because maybe you look at the box score. He's had 19 carries in the past 2 weeks, and is surprisingly the change of pace back to Breida and not Alfred Morris, and that's not for injury reasons at all. This past week, he logged 4 receptions against the Rams, and if Breida gets hurt again, he's been a little banged up this season. He's very small running back. Perhaps Raheem Mostert hops into a pretty big workload, or at least a surprisingly big workload for the 49ers. Again, these are the guys that can help you towards the end of the season. When injuries kick in, you have a guy like him.
Yeah.
This is a guy.
Oh, it was a good one, man. I did like him. I did look at him. Listen, anytime you have the potential to be getting 10-plus touches a game, you are relevant at the running back position in deep leagues.
Yeah.
It just is what it is. I think a player to watch as a potential RB1 to end the season, James White.
Well, is he not an RB1 right now?
He already is an RB1, but I'm talking about like RB1 beyond just fantasy production, but RB1 when you include the production and the volume.
So would you project that he's going to get the carries now as compared to who is it that was it Kenyon Barner that they were using? Would you project that they just give James White the most carries and also use him as their number one receiver?
James White might be averaging 15 to 20 touches a game as long as Sonny Michel's out.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a bold prediction.
No, I don't. I don't think that at all, actually.
And that's ridiculous when you take into account the fact that James White is Tom Brady's like number 2 receiver.
Almost his number 1.
There comes a point, without
this season, technically, he is the number 1, and just in terms of the numbers. But obviously, we know who's in New England and what they do.
Man, the past 3 years, James White's been one of Tom Brady's top 3 receivers. People have been so disrespectful to this guy. People are like, oh, the Patriots' offense is so unpredictable. Stop it. Stop it right now. The most predictable thing about the Patriots' offense is that they're going to throw the ball 7 yards to James White. That's the only thing you can predict.
That is the truth. And I'll tell you, as Brady's career gets longer and longer, James White becomes more and more valuable because it's easy for him to just drop back, essentially look at the secondary, be like, I don't have to squeeze it into this space. Let me just throw it to one of the best receiving backs in the league. If not the best receiving back in the league, but obviously that's up for debate. No need for that debate right now.
Possibly one of the most sure-handed. He might not be the most explosive, but possibly one of the most sure-handed and best route runners.
Well, that's really what matters at running back because, he's obviously very elusive. He's James White. And this is not going to stop at all with James White this year. This is fun stuff for people who drafted James White this year because you got him in a beautiful, beautiful position in the draft as compared to what he's performing as.
Yeah.
Do you have anyone else that you feel like you should be watching?
In recent weeks, other than 2 pretty putrid weeks, Kenyon Drake is starting to gain some momentum. He's finally broke off a run. They're starting to get some momentum. He hit rock bottom against the Bears. What that happened to him, that was just terrible. Like, you hear all the reports coming out of the Bears, out of the Dolphins camp. Like, Drake said himself, like, all of his teammates, they rallied around him. They picked him up. They helped him out. Past 2 weeks, he's been pretty good. He's got 3 20-plus point games in PPR formats on the season. That's almost half the year. Kenyon Drake going forward might do what he did last year and come on strong towards the end of the year.
I could agree with that. If you've had patience with him, he is definitely trending upwards, in my opinion.
I'm going to keep on this because there's one more person I wanted to mention. Marlon Mack.
Yeah.
Like, I actually
I'm going to get
start.
into that after as well.
Because, like, goodbye to Naheem Hines. All right, so...
I would not say that. But again, there's a section in here for this after. We could just start with the QB starts, and I could just get right into it. I didn't have Andrew Luck first, but you should be starting Andrew Luck versus the Oakland Raiders.
Agreed.
And this has a lot to do with Marlon Mack. This offense, guys, with Marlon Mack is actually a bit of a different animal. Not just with Marlon Mack. Marlon Mack and a healthy T.Y. Hilton. Jack Doyle's not even back yet. The way Ebron's been playing, Naheem Hines, Andrew Luck at quarterback, and a line that's actually playing very well for Colts standards, especially.
League standards. They're not too far down the bottom in anything.
Yeah, and this offense right now is trending upwards, and this offense is a problem. Marlon Mack may not be the best running back in the league, but he's certainly an explosive player on an Andrew Luck-led offense. I think what he has done for this offense, even against the Jets, I think if the Colts had T.Y. Hilton versus the Jets, that would have been a very different day. Obviously, struggling with the drop passes doesn't help, but when you have a sure-handed guy like T.Y.,
It wasn't even so much the drops in that game, man. That was just...
it was a lot of it. It's hard to trust a lot of the receivers that the Colts have because Eric Ebron at that point is their top receiver, and like the one criticism of Eric Ebron is that he does have a drop issue, along with the fact that you're throwing to Zach Pascal, you were throwing to Marcus Johnson, he was hurt though for the Jets game, so you're throwing to some scrubs. It's really hard to trust that, at least when you have T.Y. Hilton and now perhaps a running game, because he looks really good, Marlon Mack, and this year he looks incredible in between the tackles. There was reports all over training camp before he had gotten battered up with some injuries that he was hitting the hole this year harder than he was last year. He was looking more precise. He had learned something from Frank Gore, essentially. He was looking much more aggressive, attacking the inside. This offense is a big deal, and I think you have to roll right now in fantasy with any important piece of this offense. I think you have to roll with.
I agree. Let me ask you something. I want to get a bold prediction out of you. What do you think the percentage is that the Colts are on the table for the rest of the season?
Go undefeated for the rest of the season?
They're only 1-6. Can they reach at least 9-7?
They're 2-5. And
2-5, my mistake.
Can they reach 9-7? Yes. The odds that they run the table are slim to none. In fact, slim is really being generous, I would say. But I do think the Colts have an opportunity, depending on what the standings in the AFC turn out. I do think they have a chance of getting that last wild card spot, depending on what the standings end up looking like. But the odds that they finish more than 9-7 are slim to none.
Because I didn't follow up on the defensive stats for the league after this past week. But through 6 games at the very least, they had the leading tackler in the NFL. And a young defense only gets better as the season goes on. You could go back year after year after year. Young defenses get better middle to late in the season, whereas old defenses start to decline, even though they're veterans and they're still productive. I'm not trying to make an argument for or against veteran or young defenses. That's not what I'm getting at here. What I'm getting at is Andrew Luck is a bad man.
I agree.
Frank Reich comes from a system in Philadelphia where 2-5 is unacceptable. Something like that is unacceptable. They're a rebuilding team. They're getting healthy, they're on the rise, and Andrew Luck's confidence is only growing by the week.
And he's getting better and better by the week if you're watching the games, which obviously I do every week. I have Sunday Ticket for that reason.
Yeah, dude, it's like, I'm not going to say this is reminiscent of the year Aaron Rodgers told everybody to relax, but if anybody in the National Football League has the chance to make this turnaround,
it's Andrew Luck and the Colts. And I think very importantly also is that while their secondary is injury-riddled, they had depth at safety this year, which they needed, and they signed Mike Mitchell, who just won AFC Player of the Week. He was incredible versus the Bills in run support and in coverage.
Listen, anybody could have been incredible against the Bills.
Yes, but to be the best player on the defense for a day when you were just signed a week ago, essentially because Clayton Geathers is out now. I mean, that's impressive nonetheless. The pass rush and the linebackers are helping a depleted secondary, and that's a lot different than what the Colts usually do, and that's why their defense is different this year. How about you? Who you want to start at quarterback here?
I like Andy Dalton. I'm just going to name all 3 and tell me what you think.
Okay.
I got Andy Dalton versus Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping that's a bounce back game for Andy Dalton because that was just pitiful what he did on Sunday Night Football.
I couldn't believe it. I can't.
You couldn't believe the Bengals, the mediocre franchise that is the Cincinnati Bengals, didn't show up in prime time. Wow, deja vu 6 times in a row.
I couldn't believe he didn't get his numbers. That's all.
Yeah, no, that was pitiful.
Yeah.
I have Russell Wilson versus the Detroit Lions.
Yeah, I like that game overall.
And I have Deshaun Watson on Thursday Night Football versus the Miami Dolphins.
I have no problems with that. I thought about Deshaun Watson, and then I laid back just because Miami's corners and safeties are playing extremely well this year. And I just think that that's essentially what the Texans do. I don't think they really are particularly good at throwing to the tight end. So while I think Watson will do good, I just wasn't 100% sure as to be like start Deshaun Watson.
Oh, Thursday Night Football benefits the offense, bro.
Someone you did not mention, and quite frankly, Kirk Cousins versus the New Orleans Saints is just it's just quite simple, really. The Saints are the Saints. Kirk Cousins is averaging over 300 yards per game, and there are just far too many weapons in Minnesota on a primetime football game for Kirk Cousins to not just do what he does against the Saints. He's a stat monster, Kirk Cousins. The Saints allow quarterbacks that aren't even good to be stat monsters, and this is easy. Kirk Cousins is a guaranteed start this week. I also think Jameis Winston against Cincinnati, he's quietly had back-to-back 300-plus yard games, including 395 yards and 4 touchdowns versus Atlanta.
Yeah.
Cincinnati has now allowed 300-plus passing yards to every quarterback they've played so far other than Cam Newton and Ryan Tannehill. Neither of these teams could stop each other. I think game flow will be for Winston the entire day, and I think he's going to come out with his numbers as well. I think you could start him.
One honorable mention at the quarterback position, C.J. Beathard versus the Arizona Cardinals.
I have him as a straight sit.
Really?
Yeah.
And I mean, he had 2 straight back-to-back games. He had an incredibly impressive performance versus the Green Bay Packers on Monday Night Football. And George Kittle, Matt Breida, Pierre Garçon, Marquise Goodwin, he doesn't not have weapons.
Well, here's my thing with Arizona. If you're looking at it objectively, Arizona's been losing games because of turnovers, bad quarterback play, and their terrible run defense. That being said, while people may not recognize it because of how bad the Cardinals are losing, their secondary has done the best it can given the circumstances. This Patrick Peterson-led secondary is still very good and has actually generally been a horrible matchup for opposing quarterbacks. That being said, Beathard is one of only 2 quarterbacks this year to have 300-plus yards against Arizona when they versed him, but this defense has shut down the likes of Russell Wilson, who had less than 200 yards and no touchdowns against them. They shut down Kirk Cousins, at least as compared to his averages. He had 233 yards and only 1 touchdown. And I don't think that a guy of C.J. Beathard's caliber, I think a better quarterback could do more with the weapons he has. But for a guy of his talent, I think he has a lack of weapons to do it twice against the pass secondary like Arizona.
My thing with that is, you mentioned Kirk Cousins. What was the game flow in that game?
I mean, usually game flow or not, Cousins, they just throw the ball. It's kind of what the Vikings do.
I mean, Flat Murray had like 30 carries last week. He had 20 plus at the very least. I don't know, man. Like, I think these are 2 one-win teams that match up very well together, very evenly. And I think C.J. Beathard is a quality streaming option when you have guys like Phillip Rivers and Matt Ryan on bye week.
Fair enough.
Go to the sits, as you had mentioned it. My first sit is Case Keenum versus the Chiefs.
Mm-hmm.
Derek Carr versus the Colts, and Eli Manning versus the Redskins.
Yeah, I have Derek Carr versus the Colts as well, if you want to talk about that right now. Because my problem with Derek Carr, this is actually more, even though we were just talking up the Colts defense, me having Derek Carr as a sit right now is much more fear of trusting Oakland's offense in this current state as it is praising the Colts defense. Marshawn Lynch just went out for the year. Obviously, they traded Amari Cooper. Not that Amari Cooper was doing anything incredible for them, but this is a team that has pretty much accepted defeat this year. Obviously, the players haven't, but they're depleting their team of talent. I think game flow might be in Carr's favor, but I think right now the Colts, at least for a quick stretch, are trending upwards, and the Raiders are trending downwards. I just think these are the wrong teams versing each other at the wrong time for Derek Carr.
I agree. Here's the thing, because we're going to get into the show, and I'm going to go through the start sits for running back and receiver and tight ends, and I'm going to have 3 guys from Oakland. Derek Carr doesn't throw the ball down the field at all. He is terrible for fantasy. He is check down city right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to benefit a couple players in that offense for PPR, but in terms of standard quarterback scoring, for you want yards and touchdowns at the premium, Derek Carr is not your guy.
And the way he gets paid 7 touchdowns and 8 interceptions is just not acceptable with what they've given him, which are weapons.
Yes.
He hasn't lacked what people consider to be solid weapons.
When's that guy had an offensive coordinator for more than 2 years?
Well, I mean, he has John Gruden.
But but the turnover rate for the Oakland Raiders coaching staff is putrid. Think about Matt Stafford early in his career, how that hurt him. The same thing's going on in Oakland right now, and it's a damn shame. It's a damn shame. Because Derek Carr, they should have never fired Jack Del Rio. They should have never done that.
Ooh.
Derek Carr was working on an MVP run that year. They should have just figured that out. Teams do that so often.
It's almost like they forget. After 1 year removed after success, it's like they forget that it was ever there.
The grass isn't always greener on the other side. And you bring in a guy who hasn't coached in a decade, and you just continue this constant turnover in Oakland. You're screwing this guy. You can give him all the talent you want. You can have the best defense in the world that you want.
Well, let's see what they do with their 3 first-rounders.
Well,
Because he might not be screwed.
No, I like what Gruden's doing. I like the rebuild. But it's just screwing Derek Carr, and it angers me because I think Derek Carr is one of the premier quarterback talents in the league.
I think there's so many guys that are quote-unquote premier quarterback talents in the league at this point in the NFL that it's just hard for me to put Derek Carr above some of the guys that are playing better than him that I would consider in his tier prior to the season. A lot of it's kind of like that with Derek Carr. I also think you should be sitting Cam Newton versus Baltimore this week. Even Drew Brees was only able to get 212 against Baltimore's defense. 212 referring to the yards. Baltimore's defense is, as per usual, this is the status quo. They hold defense to a very high standard in that organization, and they very rarely fail to reach it. Cam Newton, I don't think is going to complete enough passes to put up good passing numbers versus this defense. While you do always have the threat that Cam Newton runs for a touchdown.
Or 60 yards.
Yeah, I'm just not sure that even that would be enough to salvage this into a great day for Newton, or even a particularly good one. I think what you have is a decent day at best for Cam Newton this week. At the very best.
Like, I wouldn't go out of my way to find the streamer option for Cam Newton.
Oh, I would.
Really?
Yeah, I would against the Ravens. Respect to the defense.
Yeah, no, 100%. The Ravens are one of the best defenses in the NFL. It's just, oh man, start your stud. You drafted Cam Newton to be one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the league.
How about we move on to those running backs?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll start with Kareem Hunt versus Denver. This dude's been on fire. He is Kareem Hunt. We all love him. 2 straight games with 5+ receptions. That's an uncommon development over the course of his short career so far. He has 3 receiving touchdowns over the 2-game stretch as well. Denver hasn't been good against running backs at all. Roll with 1/4 of the Kansas City Killers is what I like to call them. I'm making this up right now. You got Kareem Hunt, Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, and Patrick Mahomes. When you have matchups, just roll with those guys. Every single week. You could have all of them and win your fantasy games. Kareem Hunt's one of those guys. You definitely should be starting him versus Denver this week.
I agree 100%. One of my starts this week is David Johnson versus San Francisco 49ers.
If you can't start him this week, I actually have him as a bonus one. If you can't start him this week, you can't start him at all, but continue.
I like it, man. Like, I trust Josh Rosen to finally get it going. They had a long week. They had Thursday to Sunday after hitting rock bottom. These players take a lot of pride in their performance. And David Johnson had 2,000 all-purpose yards one season. Josh Rosen's going to figure it out. I really do believe there will be a game or two where Josh Rosen shows the flashes that people believe, that I truly do believe Josh Rosen has the potential to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're going to see it this weekend against the Niners.
And on top of that, they just fired their offensive coordinator. Essentially, the complaint has been the entire season that they're not using David Johnson the right way. So you best believe with someone else running the offense, I believe the quarterback's coach, that their priority will be to get David Johnson involved. 49ers are a great matchup. Again, if you can't start him versus the 49ers, we have a real problem with David Johnson here. Or at least the Cardinals offense.
It's putrid what they've been doing. I'm going to go right into one more guy I have.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Jalen Richard, man.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to that at all. I thought about putting him here as well.
Like, the Colts are a decent defense, but I don't think they're necessarily good enough to avoid. And Jalen Richard in PPR is just Mr. Consistent.
Yeah. Well, and as long as Andrew Luck turns the ball over, teams are going to have the chance. Because the thing is that he has just as many turnovers as Derek Carr this year. The only difference is that he has 20 passing touchdowns and Derek Carr has 7. So, these things make difference over the course of the season. But he turns the ball over quite a bit, Andrew Luck, and teams are going to continue to have opportunities against the defense, regardless of how good they play.
Yep. You have anybody else?
Yeah, I have Lamar Miller versus Miami. Good old-fashioned
nice one.
Revenge game. Miami's also been terrible against the run. I rolled with Kerryon Johnson last week versus this defense. Cha-ching. And I'm going to do it again with Lamar Miller. Not that I have him anywhere, but if I did, I'd start him. I also think that Miami's secondary is incredible, and I think they're not only going to benefit from him running the ball well, but I think they're going to go check down City to Lamar Miller often in this game, and I think for that he's going to do well. Also, we mentioned before, I would start Marlon Mack this week. I just put this here for people who are asking questions about it because a guy like Marlon Mack, obviously you see a game like that, you wonder, is it an aberration? Is it not? He's not going to do what he did every week. But again, this offense is rolling. They're versing this Oakland defense right now. This is a perfect time to be versing Oakland with near the Indianapolis Colts right now. You got to start Marlon Mack this week if you have him.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, listen, unless you're super deep, I'm not proposing your studs for Marlon Mack. but start Marlon Mack.
Yeah.
Like if you have the chance, if you're in a situation where you need your backs, Marlon Mack's a fine option. I actually like Isaiah Crowell versus the Chicago Bears. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, the Bears are going to beat the Jets. Like, I don't think the Jets are a good enough team right now to go into Chicago and win with a rookie quarterback. But that just means Isaiah Crowell is going to have, like, 25 carries.
Well, hopefully. Well, if I were the Jets, what I would want to do is essentially stop the momentum from going to the Bears, and that would mean trying to keep the offense on the field as much as possible. And that would also mean not throwing the ball as much as you might have to with Sam Darnold, because he's going to turn it over if you do, especially against the Bears.
Well, it depends if they can keep Trubisky in check.
Yeah, which they can or cannot. The Jets secondary is young and loaded with talent, but for that they're inconsistent.
They're also banged up.
Yeah, well, isn't everybody?
Oh, the Jets particularly, man.
I'm a Colts fan, trust me, I know.
Yeah.
And
see, the Colts are weird. The Colts get banged up, but they're thin before they get banged up.
The Colts, listen, man, they had talent this year in the secondary. They have talent this year in the secondary, even still right now. Now Quincy Wilson's back, no less. This is
No, they're on the up and up. Just,
yeah.
They got hurt early, so now they're healthy later.
When you're on the up and up, it means it's because you were down. So while we go into this, let's go to the running back sits. This might be a bit of a blasphemous one, and I'm saying this only if you can afford to do it, because I think sometimes people have a stud. And we always say don't bench your studs, but if you have enough studs where you can't even start them every week, sometimes you have a tough time choosing.
Yeah. You got it. You got to make risk to get the biscuit decisions.
If you have a reasonable reason, I guess, to avoid using Christian McCaffrey versus Baltimore, I would do that. Christian McCaffrey still has no rushing touchdowns this season. And quite frankly, this just goes in line. I don't think the numbers are going to be there from Cam Newton to support a good game out of Christian McCaffrey through the air. I think in PPR, I just don't think you could not start Christian McCaffrey. But I think in standard, this dude doesn't even have a chance this week. I think it's dead in the water this week in standard. PPR, I mean, listen, he's Christian McCaffrey. I think it can end up being one of those games where it's 5-6 receptions and he doesn't get a lot of yards on them because the Ravens are a great tackling team. And then on the ground, I just don't think he's going to do anything versus him. I'm going to be 100% honest with you.
I mean, even if he doesn't do much on the ground, if Cam Newton's not doing anything through the air, Christian McCaffrey will have a plethora of opportunities to just build up yardage on the ground. Do not bench Christian McCaffrey. I understand the matchup.
Well, hold on. Just real fast before you... I said only if you can afford to. I'm saying if you have 3 running backs that are all good, most likely you're worse off starting Christian McCaffrey than I'm trying to think of guys you could have that are like that. But I mean, if you're the guy who has them, you know who you are. You're better off starting your other stud.
Fair.
It's salty.
That's my boy coming into the year. I wouldn't do it to him. Another sit at running back, or both the Packers running backs.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not going to happen versus the Rams. I'm telling you right now, Damon Snacks Harrison going to the Detroit Lions for a 5th-round draft pick just improved that run defense by a mile. And honestly, an elite nose tackle going into the fold like that, it's not like he really needs time to learn the playbook. Bench Chris Carson.
I had Chris Carson on my bench when I was making the list, and I changed it just because there's nothing official saying Snacks would be getting all of the snaps this week. He's still
nose tackle.
I'm aware. He's going to get the snaps. It's just if he's getting 60%, you know what I'm saying? There's still X amount with him not on the field, and I don't think him being there just fixes Detroit's run defense overnight, although I do think it comes as close to that as possible in the world of football.
One of the best run stoppers in the league. His player efficiency, his defensive rating against the run has been top of the league since his time with the Jets 5 years ago.
Yeah, I'm not excited about Chris Carson this week, and I own him. But I wouldn't be surprised if Seattle was able to put together a good game on the ground the first week after this trade. I would not be surprised at all.
Yeah, that's fair. And my last sit at the RB position is Carlos Hyde and TJ Yeldon versus the Philadelphia Eagles. That's just going to be...
They're much better than their record shows, by the way, the Eagles.
Well, they're going to finish the year 500.
Mm.
Defending Super Bowl champions hit that hangover, bro. 8-8. I think 9-7 is their ceiling with the schedule they have to play.
That's blasphemous.
No, it is not. No, it is not with the schedule they have to. We can get into this at another time because this podcast is going a little long right now.
Yeah.
However, Phil, I said this in August when I saw their schedule. This is not a new thing. The Eagles are not a 10-6 or better team with the schedule they have to play the remainder of the season.
All right, well, then let me get to my last sits then real fast. Corey Clement, guys, this is a full-blown committee over here. I'm sorry to tell you. Literally had 8 carries for 6 yards. That's less than a yard per. I think I could have done better than that. Anyone who hoped they had a back after the Ajayi injuries should just accept defeat here and don't embarrass yourself any further with Corey Clement. Keep him on your roster because why not? I wouldn't get rid of him yet, but you got to find someone else to put in. I also think Alex Collins is a case of the same thing. If you still are, just stop relying on Alex Collins. Stop starting Alex Collins on almost every occasion except when it is the perfect matchup, and that would be my running back sits. Wide receiver starts. I will start with Stephon Diggs versus New Orleans. For those who own Diggs, you have started to realize that he's been a little inconsistent this year. The separation between him and Adam Thielen has not started to happen. It's basically been there since last year, but people like me were hopeful that that would change this year, and Adam Thielen is just better than we all thought he was, quite frankly. But last time he versed New Orleans, he had the game of his life in the playoffs last year, and it's just, again, against New Orleans, it's just almost too obvious. It's almost too obvious Diggs versus New Orleans, but in case, I don't think you were sitting him, but just in case you had your second guesses, Stephon Diggs is going to be incredible this week.
Okay. I went a little contrarian with my wide receiver options here, so bear with me. This is going to sound a little ridiculous. Start Geronimo Allison versus the Los Angeles Rams. We're just going to go rapid fire. Start Jakeem Grant versus the Houston Texans. Start Martavius Bryant versus the Indianapolis Colts. Sit Josh Gordon versus the Buffalo Bills.
Well, hold on. Before you get into the sits, if you wouldn't mind me, I wouldn't mind getting an explanation. I think it's only necessary when you say names like that.
Okay.
I would not mind an explanation for Jakeem Grant.
Okay.
And I'll leave it at that.
Jakeem Grant, very simple. He has a role in two phases of the game. He has shown his explosiveness. He's been finely consistent. If you are in a league that values return points, you could be much worse off. He has the same amount of single-digit games ever since he broke out as Stephon Diggs. Like I said, if you're a league of allows return yards for points, Jakeem Grant's actually kind of consistent. He does get those touches, and it's Thursday Night Football. Crazy things happen. Brock Osweiler has a cannon. Jakeem Grant is very fast. And there is no Kenny Stills, so they need deep threat. Jakeem Grant's that boy.
All right, I'd heard you getting eager before and starting with the sits, but I still have some starts. I only said one. I said Stephon Diggs, and that was a layup. I was taking a layup. I just want to be right about something. But Chris Godwin versus Cincinnati, I'm really liking Chris Godwin this year. I think as long as the matchup is good, which the Bengals is, you can get away with Godwin on just about any week, given your receivers aren't stacked. If you have him, feel free to start him this week. I think Chris Godwin is a generally safe start this week.
He's been in the past 2 weeks.
Yeah, and actually in general throughout the course of the season. Emmanuel Sanders versus Kansas City. Emmanuel Sanders this year is at his best when games are close. He has 26 receptions for over 300 yards when games end within 7 points, which is what happened last time. And he only had 5 receptions for 45 yards in that game. I think he's going to bounce back this time against the Chiefs, at least in terms of his receiving production, as wide receivers don't always throw for passing touchdowns. I think that if the Broncos want to win this game, they best believe they should be giving it to Emmanuel Sanders, their leading receiver this year. He's been very good this year, Emmanuel Sanders. Versus Kansas City, this matchup works well. I like Emmanuel Sanders to start this week. I'm done with starts. We could get into sits if you're done with starts.
Yeah, I'm done with starts. I'm just going to name my 3 sits, go a little rapid fire here. One of my sits for this week, Josh Gordon versus the Buffalo Bills. I think Monday Night Football, the New England Patriots are going to go into Buffalo, and the New England Patriots are going to do what they do best, and that's blow out Buffalo.
Yeah, yeah, they do that well.
So,
and the Colts just did it.
Exactly. So, easy pick 'em pool. That's what I'm going with this week. Saved that one for this moment. Don't play Josh Gordon. It's nothing against Josh Gordon. He has proven me wrong.
Well, the Bills have been outstanding versus wide receivers this year.
Yeah.
It's no like outstanding.
They
Like,
have been good.
It's more than good.
I know.
It's like not name the Jaguars, they're the best team. And I'm going to tell you that even last week, Indianapolis scored 37 points. They beat them 37-5. Andrew Luck threw 4 touchdowns. You know who the leading receiver was on that team in yards
I
and
want to
receptions?
say it was Eric Swope.
No, literally wide receivers. Chester Rogers, with 4 receptions and 40 yards, led that receiving core in receptions and yards.
Wow.
And that's in a 37-5 rout of the Buffalo Bills. I'm just saying.
That's terrible, man. Their lack of a quarterback is just wasting an elite defense, and it's sad seeing that because defenses win championships, and it's no mistake seeing top 10 defenses making the playoffs, and Buffalo has no chance because of it.
Yeah, and I'm just going to quickly, you said rapid fire.
Yeah, no, please.
Yeah. So you said Josh Gordon. I said Julian Edelman.
Really?
Yeah, because I think that the Patriots have a better chance of just hitting Josh Gordon for a 70-yard touchdown than they do of consistently getting Julian Edelman the points the way he gets them, which are these 8-yard receptions and that PPR production. I don't think he's going to be able to do it versus. Well, I mean, he's able to do it versus anyone. They're the Patriots.
They're just not gonna use him. He's 32.
Yeah, there's just no need. I don't think that Julian Edelman's a start versus the Bills. I think he's a solid sit, and I think you could basically rely on him having less than 10 in PPR.
Yeah, no, it's totally fair. My second sit is Demaryius Thomas versus the Chiefs. Again, I have Keenum as a sit.
I hope you're right about that, because then Emmanuel Sanders has to do good. He's my only chance of being wrong.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, they're just terrible.
That offense has been running through Phillip Lindsay and Emmanuel Sanders all season. I don't expect that to stop.
I have you should be sitting Alshon Jeffrey versus Jacksonville. I wanted to get one with pop on the sits here. Maybe it doesn't have pop because it's against Jacksonville, but Alshon Jeffrey has done good in spite of some pretty tough matchups generally since he's been playing. But I pretty much won't recommend. Well, actually, rather, I would recommend sitting any receiver, any number 1 receiver versus Jacksonville if they're not like OBJ, Julio, DeAndre Hopkins, Adam Thielen. I don't think that they have to use Alshon Jeffrey in this game. And quite frankly, I think it's probably going to be Zach Ertz against
It could
the Jaguars.
be. You know what? Jacksonville plays very well in London. Jacksonville has played in London, I believe, ever since they started doing the London games. Jacksonville probably has the most appearances in London. And Jacksonville, they might move there. That might be their home team. There's a level of motivation they play with over there. And I do agree with you that the Jaguars will come out with a chip on their shoulder. I think Bortles getting benched, Mr. Inconsistent himself.
Is he starting this week?
Yeah.
He is? I also say you should bench all the Jacksonville receivers for the time being. I don't think you should start a single one.
Jacksonville Jaguars offense is blacklisted.
For as long as this keeps up, you can't trust a single one of them. It's bad.
Okay. Abort mission. If you
Abort.
if you bet on D.D. Westbrook, abort. Killing Cole, abort.
Yeah. I'm ready for tight ends. Anyone else you have to say at wide receiver sits before I do that is up to you.
Yeah. Ignore the volume. Antonio Callaway, you can't start until he actually does something.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah, and that offense isn't fully in rhythm yet, right? So it's going to be hard to trust most people week in and week out, except
Jarvis Landry.
David Njoku.
Yes.
I'm going to tell you, 2 straight games now with 50-plus yards and a touchdown. This is another juicy matchup versus the Steelers. The tight end position is not great, so even tight ends you should start aren't guaranteed to have great numbers, but David Njoku is probably a better option than whoever you have, most likely.
Yeah, man, he's putting up Kyle Rudolph numbers from last season. Very similar in terms of the way they're producing and the volume in which they're getting it. David Njoku, again, rookie quarterbacks like big body tight ends, and David Njoku just happens to be a first-round talent, and it's not unwarranted that he was a first-round pick.
I agree.
It just is what it is, and this will continue for the rest of the season. David Njoku, in his next 3 matchups, include the Steelers, the Falcons, and the Chiefs.
Yeah.
Just ride that for the next few weeks, guys, because you might have one of the best tight ends in fantasy football outside of Zach Ertz.
Agreed.
Going on to the starts, again, it's so weird. Jared Cook versus the Colts. I trust everybody but Derek Carr.
Yeah, Jared Cook versus the Colts is a good one. I didn't put him there because I'm a Colts fan. I figured you would do it. And it's a good matchup. The Colts aren't very good versus tight ends. They're really not particularly great against anyone. They're just not particularly bad against anyone either. But Jared Cook, with what's going on over there, is definitely a safe guy to get targets this week. O.J. Howard versus the Bengals, I think this is a similar case to David Njoku. Well, actually, rather, let me put it like this. I think he's the opposite of Alex Collins. You stop starting Alex Collins and stop sitting O.J. Howard.
Yeah.
Again, unless you have one of the tight ends, just stop sitting him. There's no need to do it. He's clearly a premier piece in that offense, and this week against the Bengals, that's going to be a shootout. Benjamin Watson as well, I have against the Vikings, have actually been really good against receivers this year. They have a very good secondary.
Yeah.
Not that I think it's going to stop the Saints, but I do think that Drew Brees has no problem throwing to the tight end. I think for that, Benjamin Watson this week will benefit against the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah. 2 more starts. Eric Ebron versus the Raiders. This is a good matchup for tight ends. Eric Ebron, Jared Cook, both could be top 10 tight ends this week. And sticking with the Bengals and the Buccaneers, CJ Uzomah has been fantasy relevant for weeks now. Stop sleeping on him because you can't pronounce his last name and you never heard of him before because he was a blocker for 2 years. This guy's actually talented, and the Bengals have a lack of talent at the tight end. I like Uzomah against the Buccaneers, and he's worth a start at the tight end position.
I'm ready for sits if you are. I have some big names in the sits this week.
I have 2.
Some really big names in the sits this week. I could get burned by this one. And this is another one of those ones. I did a lot of these this week where in my sits I'd put one big name. Where it's like, you wouldn't think. I have Kyle Rudolph versus the Saints as a sit.
That's fair.
If you happen to have another tight end roster, perhaps a David Njoku, perhaps an O.J. Howard, someone you could have acquired during the season while still investing into Kyle Rudolph, I'd be willing to sit Rudolph this week. Sometimes you don't have a better option than Rudolph at tight end, and that is what it is. But based off the numbers, the production in this game should be more in the favor of Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs, and Laquan Treadwell if they're going to throw a lot. You're relying on a touchdown in a major way against the Saints, I think, with Kyle Rudolph. And I'm just not willing to do that.
Fair. I have Cameron Brate and Charles Clay.
Yeah, Cameron Brate, I think, is...
He's done. Hey, listen. If O.J. Howard goes down, Cameron Brate's starting tight end.
Cameron Brate's still making that money, though.
Yeah, he doesn't care.
Yeah.
He's getting paid. He's got his guaranteed money. He's sitting back.
He'll use him. Him and Jameis Winston still have the chemistry, so he's a pair of sure hands. So for the Buccaneers, that's an invaluable player to have. For fantasy purposes, not so much.
And with their offensive line, he's certainly an invaluable piece to have.
Mm-hmm. I have Evan Ingram versus Washington. I jumped the gun a little bit last week is what I did. I really like Evan Ingram, the talent. I think it's almost revolutionary at the tight end position.
Oh, you think he has... When you say revolutionary and you mention the name and you mention tight end position, immediately my thought goes to the likes of Tony Gonzalez, Shannon Sharp, Antonio Gates. You think Evan Ingram has that type of receiving ability?
Yes, because I think in terms of if you watch him play, I think his flexibility and how limber he is, the way he could use his body, he is just as limber as a wide receiver, and that's one thing that tight ends lack, is they're always a little more stiff, they're a little bit bigger, but I think Evan Ingram would literally be the same player if they just started him opposite Odell Beckham Jr. on the outside, indefinitely. I think he's that good of a receiver, and I think for that he's revolutionary. Obviously, I don't think he's going to be the best tight end of all time, I just think for what he does, he has the potential to be the best to ever do it at receiving. But what a bold prediction. I don't predict that to happen, just putting a ceiling on his talent. Essentially, that being said, him and Eli are not on the same page right now. The entire offense is off. No need to play Evan Ingram. Really no need to play Evan Ingram at all. Obviously, don't get rid of him unless it's a trade, but don't drop him. Keep him on your bench. Maybe it picks up towards the end of the year, but right now you got to sit him.
Yeah. This is a trap game for the Washington Redskins. They're going to New York. The Giants want to bust their season because the Giants don't want to see the Redskins play well. I agree with you. Sit Evan Ingram. But I think that's gonna be Giants' second win of the season.
I also have sitting Jordan Reed against the Giants as well. If you just look at the trends this year, they don't want to pepper Jordan Reed with targets anymore, rightfully so. They'd rather use the combo of him and the ageless Vernon Davis. The Giants have done well versus the tight end position this year, and Jordan Reed hasn't had a touchdown since week 1. Really hasn't given you much for reason other than his name to do anything with him. So I would sit him.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to move on to defensive streams. I don't know if you have anybody else.
Nope, I don't have many streams this week. But
I have 3. Right off the bat here, Chicago versus the New York Jets. Obviously, you can't stream Chicago, but for daily fantasy purposes, Chicago with Khalil Mack, Leonard Floyd, and friends versus beat-up New York Jets. take that to the bank. I got the Houston Texans as a nice streaming option versus the Miami Dolphins on Thursday Night Football. And I have the Colts as a nice streaming option versus the Raiders. The Colts, while I do think there will be individual success in PPR for the Raiders' offensive talent, I do not believe there will be much team success. And that's what you look for when you're streaming defenses.
Yeah, you want a team that's not going to allow a lot of points, which is why I have the Patriots versus the Bills, because
Easy.
you take anyone versus the Bills.
Easy.
And you have the 49ers at Arizona, because you take anyone versus Arizona. And this week, I didn't see a lot of streams because a lot of the defenses that I thought had really good matchups were ones that were definitely already rostered. This week, the Bills and Arizona, which are two of my favorite matchups for defenses, both have defenses that you could potentially get off of free agency with the Patriots versus the Bills and the Niners versus Arizona.
100%. All right, unless you have some kicker streams, which we're not doing.
Yeah, I've got nothing, guys. We're closing in on an hour here. I think this is pretty good. I'm pretty tired, man. I'm looking forward to going to sleep.
That sounds pretty good, dude.
Yeah, for sure, guys. So this is Run the Gauntlet, working in partnership with the Game Changer Sports Network. I am Justin Alfiero. Next to me is James LeBeau. He's feeling a little shy all of a sudden. Well, I did. And I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Stay tuned. Next week we're going to be doing the same shtick. Thanks, guys.